Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Pod Smash,
where gaming goes to grab a beer.
Ooh. We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are talking about fishing, which is something that appears in a lot of video games that aren't explicitly about fishing. So we wanted to talk about that. We will also take the opportunity to talk about fishing sims, fishing video game simulators, which are always fun. I guess neither of us are big fishers, so this should be a fun thing for us to talk about because neither of us are super into the activity itself. But we're going to talk about it because
great disclaimer right now. If you are rolling your eyes and thinking you're going to skip this episode and wait for next week, don't, because we are in the same boat. And yes, that is a pun that is very intended. I hate fishing in video games, and it's the most boring and benign thing. I'm sorry, not benign. The most boring and ridiculous extra thing, redundant. I don't care. I hated it since Ocarina of Time and before that, and I'm with you. So listen to us talk about it because you're going to get the same perspective that I have if you don't like fishing. If you do like fishing, stick with us.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear that side of it. We want to hear your side of it as well.
Yeah, but we'll also be talking about a little bit of like where it comes from, the history of it and stuff like that. So it's not just going to be poo-pooing on fishing video games because we don't like to yuck other people's yums, but we yuck it for ourselves sometimes, I guess. So,
yep.
Cool. Well, then, before we get into all of that, we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
So that fun little noise you heard was actually a cork pop of a bottle of rum, because sometimes we mix spirits in with our beer. So I don't have any beer in my house right now, and I did not have the time to go get any, but I did have a bottle of rum that I picked up specifically to play with Sea of Thieves because I'm that kind of gamer. And as I'm sailing the seven seas, pirating and doing the thing, I want to be a pirate drinking rum. And so I am drinking a rum that is new to me. I've never heard of it. Saw it at the ABC store and picked it up on a whim, called Bumbu. And it is an authentic Caribbean legend. Bumbu is masterfully blended by hand from island rums and native spices chosen from across the West Indies. Based on 16th century native recipes, Bumbu reveals its history and craftsmanship in every sip. The original Bumbu. Funny part. So I read that, right? I'm in the store, I pick it up off the shelf, and I'm reading that. I'm like, this sounds exactly what I want. This is awesome. I get home, and I look at the front, which has this heavily stylized logo emblem on the front that in there engraved, you can barely see it unless you hold it in a certain angle of the light. It says rum with natural flavors. If I would have seen that in the store, I would have put it back on the shelf immediately because I don't like flavored things. I want a spirit. Sometimes there's a place and time for flavored stuff when you want to make a cocktail and you want to go for a specific deal. Southern Comfort in eggnog is amazing. Southern Comfort is a flavored bourbon. Mm-hmm. This is okay. So that's it. I'm stuck with it, right? I already bought it. It's already open. I can't return it. So I take a sip and now I'm going to describe the taste. It tastes like Robitussin, but instead of fruit, it's caramel. It's gross. It is not good. And I'm stuck with a whole bottle
of it.
Yeah. Not good. Yeah. It tastes like caramel flavored medicine. It's ridiculously sweet. It is overwhelmingly sweet for a rum.
But hey, the flavors are natural.
Yeah. We'll see. So who knows what I'm poisoning myself with tonight. But this is what I'm drinking, and I continue to drink it on the show because I wanted to tell you that story. And
that's funny. Yeah.
Don't ever buy Bumbu rum. I feel like I need to mix this with like sour mix or something, just like something completely on the other end of the spectrum to cut into the sweetness.
Put in some eggnog because that's what eggnog's supposed to be. Is rum.
No, this is as sweet as a Coca-Cola, and I'm not going to add it to something that's that sweet to make it worse. I want to cut the sweetness. I want to thin this thing down. I want to put like...
What? It's not like fire? The sugar and the sugar don't like burn each other out?
Maybe. I'm not willing to try it though.
All right. I grabbed some new beer today, so I'm drinking from Midnight Brewery in Goochland County, Virginia. That is an actual county here in Virginia. I'm not just Goochland County. It's a place. If you are not a local Virginian and were wondering why I said those words. Anyways, I'm drinking Midnight Brewery's Rockville Red, an Irish red ale. So I saw this there. Yeah, it's actually pretty good. I like a good Irish red ale every once in a while. Like I'm a fan of red ales just because they're a little a little different. They're a little bit more, they're like cider without the sugar is sometimes the way I see red ales, even though I know that they're made completely differently. Like that's always the vibe I get from red ales, and I love them. So I'll read the can here. It says, a beautiful blend of caramel malts and earthy hops. The Irish red ale's roasty finish makes it the perfect beer for burgers, barbecue, and even dessert. This is surprisingly, I kind of expect reds to be a little bit like crisper and drier, not sweet. But this is actually fairly sweet, and it's definitely very crisp. It almost tastes like a cider to me, like a beer flavored cider. But it's good. I like it. The only downside is I expect my red ales to be red, right? Like have that reddish look to them, and it's got a reddish tinge, but it's still very brown. So still good though. I like it. Rockville Red from Goochland County Midnight Brewery.
Yeah, I have not had it. I looked up a picture of it, and I'm checking my Untapped. And I don't have a check-in for it, so sounds good. I want it. I love red ales.
I've got 6 of them,
Irish
so
ales. Yeah,
come get it.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I will take up the banter, or at least part of the banter tonight, to share. Okay. My wife and I have finally shared it with social media, so I can share it on the podcast. It's dangerous to go alone, so my son is taking his little sister with him this July.
Yay!
My wife and I are pregnant with our second child, and it is a girl, so she is a girl. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. Due date is in July, so very different from our forecasted ice baby. My son was born in February, and there was like a potential ice storm that weekend. So it didn't actually end up being icy, so we fortunately were able to get there with no problem. But yeah, definitely like cold winter. Got dark early. I remember all that stuff just, when my son was born. So this will be like, summer solstice. It'll be hot and crazy. So looking forward to that.
July is a fantastic month to have a birthday. It is the month that my birthday is in. And my brother, T-Bone,
you're not
friend of the show.
You're not biased at all, are you?
I love July birthdays. It's not in school. It doesn't interfere with anything. You can take vacations during it. It's like family vacations in the summer because school's not in session. So you can do that and make it a cool birthday thing. It's hot. You can have cookouts. You can be outside. Your possibilities are endless.
I know. I have a summer birthday myself. So.
Yes. Yes, you do.
She will hopefully be, a few weeks after my wife and I's birthdays, which are also in June. So, yeah, no, we're looking forward to it. That's how I announced it on Facebook, though, is I got a little picture of the It's Dangerous to Go Alone from the first Zelda.
So on brand.
And then I put I taped right underneath the sword, I taped the sonogram pictures, the ultrasounds. And then I had my son reaching for it, and he was wearing all green. I don't know if those are details that anybody noticed but me.
It was black and white.
I tried to include them. The picture was black and white, but my son was dressed in green. He was just in a green footy pajamas or whatever. If I had Zelda
footy pajamas. Why did you post the picture in color?
Because I only have a black and white printer.
No, I meant like the whole picture. Am I stupid?
I think you're stupid because
I'm probably
definitely all in color. So yeah, I also cheekily put on the caption was, it takes 4 heart pieces, because there's 4 of us now, will be 4 of us. So it takes 4 heart pieces to fill up a heart container. Our princess joins the adventure, July 2021 or July 21. Again, cheeky little details that I hope people notice, but I have no idea because no one commented on the full thing. People are just like, I love the reference. And I'm like, but which part? Because I'm a nerd and I want people to be like, let's
You put some time and thought into this. You want to be recognized for it.
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's got 200 something likes on it, but not because of anything to do with my brilliance.
That's totally just because your wife's
my wife's
baby.
Yeah, right. So I offered to let her come up with her own pregnancy announcement, and then we would post them both at the same time, but she got lazy and was just like, just post yours and then tag me in it, so that way everyone on my social media can see it or whatever. And I'm like, at first I was like, cool, great, I get all the glory in this case. No, it was a clever subversion on her part, because again, nobody from her side of things cares, but she has the overwhelmingly amount of people who want to like and comment on it. So I'm like, Jacques,
you just want all her followers attention. That's what you want.
No, I want more than that. I have more complicated needs than that. I would rather have had 20 people like it and comment about how brilliant my Zelda references were than 200 people comment on it and just be like, congratulations, we're so excited, you're having a girl. I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I care about me. Or rather, I've been excited about all that stuff for months now, so I want people to get excited about my brilliance because I'm super self-centered. That's what social media is all about, though, right?
It is, but here's the reality of it all, and I'll walk you through my perception of this story, of this picture.
Okay.
As I'm scrolling through my feed, doom scrolling across all of Facebook, I see it, but I already know, so there's that. That's a different caveat you told me months ago.
Yep.
So I'm kind of on the inside here when it comes to this. It's not new news to me. Someone else might see this and be like, oh, and then like really pay attention. Where I was like, oh, there's the announcement. It's public now. And it was this black and white picture that I didn't even realize was a Zelda reference yet. And I saw the 3 ultrasound pictures below it with your son, Gavin, pointing at one and your wife holding it in front of her. And I was like, okay, that's their announcement. And I moved on. But then because I commented on it or I liked it, I got a notification that another friend of ours, Ryan, on the show, we interviewed him before, commented making a Zelda reference. At that point, my attention was drawn to the actual picture where I saw the text, "It's dangerous to go alone, take this." Awesome. It is a Zelda reference. Gavin's going to take his new sister with him.
On an adventure.
I did not know.
That is called life.
And there's the other detail of the 3 ultrasound pictures right under the sword, as if that's the placement of it for the sword in the cave. No, until you told me that. Didn't see that. And the fact that Gavin's wearing green, also didn't notice that at all. So if I'm a nerd and on that level with Zelda and didn't catch that stuff, there's probably a lot of people that didn't. So you can't be too hard on the internet.
That's fair. Yeah. I overthought it. It sounds like I overthought it and overworked it, where I could have simplified it and it would have had the exact same effect. I mean, it's going to have the same effect anyways because we're having a girl, so we're having another child, so people are going to be excited one way or another. Yep. But our friend, our friend Ryan did comment that, what is he going to do with the trifecta of photos? I said, I don't know. It's Zelda, so it's probably some magical BS or whatever. So, anyways, cool. That would be a weird Zelda game, though, like if the gimmick was, first, Ocarina of Time, you play music and travel through time. Majora's Mask, you put masks on and become other creatures. The ultrasound of life, and you carry an ultrasound with you and check on people's babies. But the magical babies, I don't know, you travel inside the uteri. Who knows?
No.
Make it happen, Nintendo. You will probably be great. You see, but then if Nintendo announced that game, you'd be like, "Oh, that sounds amazing," because it wouldn't be as bad as you just made it sound. I'm cringing. It's cringeworthy. Yeah, it was pretty cringeworthy. I'll accept that. Anyways, so yes, raising children and deepening our fatherhoods are our favorite things, but
doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite
Things is a segment of our show where we share with you something we're excited about, something we've discovered or rediscovered or experienced this week that we want to share with you in hopes that you are inspired to find your next favorite thing.
My favorite thing was a surprise to me that came about unexpectedly for everyone involved. Saturday was the day that my wife and I had planned to celebrate our Valentine's Day, even though Valentine's Day fell on Sunday. Mm-hmm. We had planned to pick up a cheese board from Fraser downtown, as a furniture store that makes like handmade wooden furniture. Well, they had this deal with Orofino, our favorite Italian restaurant downtown, where you could get a charcuterie with their house-made cheese board with your emblem on it. And you can choose whatever letter you want to have engraved on the cheese board itself. Hilariously enough, we were talking about wanting something like a cheese board to serve guests when they come over, or to even have our own in-house charcuterie. And Orofino was offering wine to go with it. So it was a whole package deal. We ordered it online, and we were going to go pick it up Saturday and have put the kids to bed. And Saturday night was going to be our Valentine's night with that after dinner. And my parents surprised us by saying, "Hey, why don't we come pick up your son, your oldest son, and take him with us for a sleepover?" And I was like, that's amazing. Leaving me with the baby and my wife. Well, my wife is in grad school and she has homework to do. So she had the day now without my 5-year-old around to get schoolwork done, which further freed her up for the evening. But while all of that was happening, my son, the baby, was asleep. I had the middle of the day to myself, which I never have. My self time is always at night after the kids go to bed, when my wife is busy. That's when I get my Termite individual time. This time I had a giant window of time in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday. And I was like, ooh, this is amazing. So I played Cyberpunk and I finally finished the platinum. I did it. I grind all of the gigs and the the police things that you have to do through the last area, which was Santo Domingo, after freaking out, talking to you on the phone about, or chatting with you on Facebook Messenger about the potential glitch that I didn't follow the advice properly. And like, I could be bugged out and spend, who knows, 10 to 15 more hours of game time trying to get through the intro. So starting a new game in order to knock this area out. But it turns out I ended up running into 0 bugs with any of the gigs or any of the police. I went through every single gig gig and police thing in the entire game. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's the very grindiest thing. But I was at the end of it anyway, and I finally platinumed it. That's all of what I just said is only context to get to my actual favorite thing. And my actual favorite thing in the middle of all of that was Persona 5 Royal. Oh my gosh. Persona 5 Royal is everything everyone has made it up to be. It is absolutely amazing. If you are a Japanese RPG fan at all, it is everything you want and more. Turn-based combat, amazing visuals, great music, and an enthralling, gripping storyline that is so addicting. I haven't experienced since like The Last of Us Part 2. I have not wanted to continue playing a game like Persona 5. More and more.
Better and better.
It's drawing me in so much, and it's so deep, and like, yet it's a deep story that deals with lots of like self-worth, suicide, abuse, and oppression, and it's crazy. And I'm only like 7 hours in, and I can articulate like, and I'm that excited. Like, it's nuts. It's good. So that's my favorite thing is Valentine's Day, having a date with your wife, and Persona 5.
Having a date with my wife? You had a date with my wife?
You wouldn't know.
Well, I do now, apparently. You just said it. That's funny.
I ain't saying nothing.
All right. Just to be clear, he had a date with his wife. I figured I might as well clarify that for anybody out there who's like, why are they being so flippant about this? All right. My favorite thing is one that I have talked about on the podcast before, but my wife and I finally wrapped up. What were we watching? Oh, we were watching Black Sails, which was also a very good show. Great pirate show. I think I mentioned that as a favorite thing a while ago when we had started it.
Yep.
So we finished that and we finally picked up. The next thing on our list was to pick up season 5 of The Expanse, which came out last month, I think. And oh my gosh, I know I've talked about The Expanse on the show before, but
you have.
It will probably happen frequently whenever new seasons come out. Although I guess it'll only happen one more time because 6 seasons the last one. But 5th season so far is just it's just so good. It's incredibly gripping. 4th season was a little bit slower for me. I didn't like 4th season as much as I had 2nd and 3rd seasons. 5th season is back to that magic from those middle seasons. It's incredible. So if you are a fan of big budget sci-fi and have an Amazon Prime subscription, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from watching The Expanse. It's so good. There's 5 seasons on Amazon. Like I said, they'll be ending with the 6th. So freaking awesome show. That's my favorite thing. And without further ado, that moves us to our next segment, which is DLC. DLC stands for downloadable content, and it is a fun conversation that you wouldn't normally have about video games. Sometimes it's related to the main topic, sometimes it's not. And since we're talking about fishing tonight, I thought it would be fun to talk about the other thing that comes to mind when I think of fishing, which is phishing spelled with a PH, which is a hacking strategy where they try to, and it's called phishing because they try to, it's like casting their nets. They send out emails to a company, an organization, or just to various people in hopes that you click a link or whatever that they have onto it, and then it executes code and gets them into your system or whatever. So that's what phishing is. There's another variant called spear phishing, which is where they like target a specific person and make a highly customized, tailored email that they try to target to get a person to click on it. So it's usually, again, like they'll find someone they'll pull someone up on Facebook at a company or whatever who they suspect might have access to files they want or whatever, and then they send a tailored, customized email. That's spear phishing. So it's spelled with a PH, and so I thought it would be fun to extrapolate and talk about that with video games. So long intro aside, our DLC prompt for tonight is we are designing a phishing attack. We are hackers designing a phishing attack, but instead of hacking a normal person in the world, we are trying to hack a video game character. So what video game character are we trying to hack, and what does the phishing attack look like? How would you go about phishing this video game character?
We would, if you want easy bait, you could go right after Ethan Mars from Heavy Rain. And you may not have played that game.
I haven't.
But his son gets abducted by the origami killer. And the whole game is uncovering the mystery of who the origami killer is and what his motive is and all of this. And you interact with the police department, and you have your wife, and you have all these other characters that you interact with around. But Ethan Mars is like the most desperate, shallow, kind of like bubbling moron as you would expect in like a main character in this type of if it was a movie. And he would be the easiest like target because he lost his job, he lost his wife over this whole thing, and he's super, super desperate for any information whatsoever about the origami killer and the son. So you could draft an email in a second that has like teases him with any information on how to solve all of these things and completely.
Gosh, you could just pretend to be the killer himself.
Yep.
And do some basic research and figure out enough to make it sound plausible, and then he would click whatever link in there. Poor guy, then get fished. He
would. After all of those deep, heavy things, I'm being flippant. The game is awesome. It's very much an emotional wreck. I mean, it's like, especially.
But it would be like a crazy twist if in the middle of it, the guy got fished by someone pretending to be the killer. Yeah, that's pretty funny. By Termite pretending to be the killer.
I do have a second one, a bonus one.
Okay, I was gonna say I've got one too. If you want me to throw one.
You want to go back and forth? You want to ping pong? You go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
We'll come back to mine. Yeah.
Actually, real quick, back to the risk or the heavy rain one. Real quick, what are you trying to get? Are you trying to get into his bank accounts or something? Like, or is there other information you're trying to get? Yeah,
actually, he's got this real fancy house.
Oh, sweet. And, so you're just trying to give him that money.
Yeah, like he's got some money, but I don't remember any details from the game. If anyone in the audience knows like what his job was or what his financial situation would look like, I'd love to know. But yeah, nice. He has that fancy house at the beginning. So either him or his wife has some money somewhere that I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm. So my pick is we're going to fish Captain Quark from Ratchet and Clank.
Oh yeah, he's super easy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you talk about an actual class A moron. Yeah.
I mean, legit, I would do it. My first thought is to just pose as press, some kind of media outlet that wants to do an exclusive interview with him and include a link to a some kind of Zoom call or something, whatever the Ratchet and Clank universe's equivalent of Zoom is. And just include a link in there, and it's super flattering. And if you want to talk all about how great you are, blah 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 blah, we want to talk about how much better you are than Ratchet, whatever. Word all with that stuff to make him flatter him and all that stuff, and just boom. And I guess we're working for what's the bad guy's name in that is it Nefarious? Is it Dr. Nefarious? Is that Ratchet?
I don't remember.
Yeah, right. Because all those bad guys are always so similar in those games.
We talked about Ratchet and Clank a bunch, yet we don't even know the main antagonist's name.
But probably,
we're a sham. That's it. We're fake gamer girls.
Dr. Nefarious? Nefarious? I don't know. Whatever. Working for the bad guy. I'd probably be working for the bad guy, or at least I'd be an independent agent wanting to sell dirt on Fish Captain Quark to then go sell the dirt to the villain type. And yeah, that's my pick. What's your last one? What's your bonus one?
My bonus one is another emotionally crippled male, Max Payne. So someone else he came home and saw his wife and child murdered, which again is a crazy, deep, emotional train wreck of a game. One of the first experiences in my life that was like gripping as far as adulthood and understanding the complexities of storytelling that video games can do. So Max Payne is awesome, but that is another victim. As an old detective, he might actually be onto the phishing attempt. So we have to be very creative because he was, when I say old detective, I meant he was previously a detective on the force of the police and got kicked off because he was obsessed with trying to find the killer of his ex-wife and baby, rightfully so. And then that led him down a path of alcoholism and he got kicked off the force. And so he kind of took up the van.
You just like to target these poor guys who.
Well, you're talking about like actual strategic phishing attacks. These are what you go at. Like in any of the phishing attack training we get for work. Anyone that's involved in like DoD world, this is exactly the kind of stuff that people go after when they do phishing attacks. So I've just been like trained to think this way about phishing attacks. Like, oh, you have something that's
go after
like,
poor vulnerable alcoholics who probably have suffered a deep personal loss.
That's what they do. It's so bad.
I know.
So
it is
horrible.
Really bad. Phishing is awful.
Yep. And so anyway, Max Payne's probably not very rich though, so I don't know what we could get out of him. Maybe some inside knowledge to the force he used to work for. So if like you were trying to exonerate someone else or collect dirt to make deals, to cut deals with lawyers, to get prisoners.
Oh yeah, you're totally trying. You know that Max Payne is that kind of like renegade type who probably keeps backup copies of all the files that he ever worked on illegally. Yeah. Yep. And he's probably got all kinds of dirt on like the chief of police and stuff like that. So you totally then use that, leverage that to. He's one of those like money. Jumping points. You fish him, and then you get information which you then use to tailor new fishing attacks.
Exactly.
That's totally the strategy there. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm into it. All right, cool. That's DLC. So if you were a hacker of video game characters, who would you fish and why? And what would that fishing attack look like? We want to hear all of that and all of your responses to this DLC. And Termite will tell you where you can do that.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where you'll find links to all of our podcasting services, as well as our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. We also have links to our Discord server and all of our show notes. You can find us there. You can interact with us on social media. You can interact with us on Discord, jump into the conversations and get to know each other. And you can also find us on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash, where every single Monday and Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, we on Monday have a news show where we run through weekly video game news that we care about. And on Wednesday, yes, I said we care about because we can't go through all the news. It's a half-hour show, and we're not going to run through every single bit of the video game news. It's quick. It's Penguin and Termite at their finest, given their spins and their punditry on the news, and that's what it is. And then on Wednesday nights, we have our weekly video game live streams where we play a game and you can tag along with us. We try to educate the audience on what we're playing, who was it made by, what was it published for, and what the pedigree of the game is. We have a good time doing it, interacting with our audience, chatting with you folks. If you're at all interested in our Twitch channel, please go there and subscribe so you are made aware when we do go live, and keep an eye on our socials for all of our upcoming goings-ons in the world of 80-Bit Pod Smash.
It was Dr. Nefarious for the record. So
all right. Hashtag Penguin was correct.
I figured I'd throw that in there. All right. Yep. So our main topic tonight, we are talking about fishing with an F this time. The activity where one goes and uses some mechanism or another to catch fish in the wild, but we are talking about the virtual video game versions of that. So our first question is not going to be super condescending in regards to what is fishing. It's just going to be, what is the difference between a fishing mini game or fishing system in a video game, and what's the difference between that and a fishing simulator? So a fishing game, to be more
the difference
specific.
Between a fishing game and a fishing mini game that's present in another one.
Yes, basically.
Fishing simulators are like Cabela's. I don't know them, but they're like fishing simulators, where the entire game is just this really ridiculously realistic rod and reel type game where you simulate the real life in the world fishing spots with real life boats, and you meticulously use real life bait and systems in place to simulate water and physics and what fish and seasons and weather and all of that stuff, where the entire game is nothing but fishing. Where a fishing system in a video game, I'm just going to use this as a good example because it's recent and it's in there, is like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot occasionally has some materials you need to cook with from fishing only. And so you run down to a dock and you do this like button press sequence and you get some fish that give you the materials you need to go do things elsewhere in the game. So nothing at all in Dragon Ball Z a fishing game because it's Dragon Ball Z. It copies the story from the anime and it's a fighting game, but as a fishing system in it.
Yep.
So that's
and there's so many examples of these, and the reason why we even bring it up, the only reason why, like, this is the entire crux of this conversation, is this idea of like we want to mostly use this first question as a way of drawing a distinction between, like, we don't really have anything against fishing sims in regards to, like, they're just like any other sims, like people who are into that aspect of it, either really into fishing or recognize that they're probably never going to ever really go fishing, and so try a fishing simulator to like get that experience. That's great, and the more detailed, more rich those are, the better. There's tons of examples out there. There's like the Bass Pro games. There's like Action Bass. There's a game called Angler. There's a Sega. Isn't there a Sega bass fishing? Yep. A lot of bass. Oh, yeah. Apparently people love bass. So yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of great fishing games out there or fishing sims out there for people who want to do that. I personally, again, like as we mentioned at the onset of this, I don't really like fishing in real life. I understand the appeal of it. I don't share the appeal, but it's a huge hobby, and it's actually a really good skill to learn if you have the patience for it. It's one of those things where, like, if you know how to fish, then, like hunting, you kind of know that you'd be able to take care of your needs in an environment or circumstance where you didn't have the grocery store available to you. So highest respect for fishing and fishing sims. But again, we're not going to spend most of tonight talking about that. We're going to spend tonight talking about this weird obsession that video game developers seem to have with including fishing mini games in their RPGs, first person shooters, freaking action games. Like, just so many games seem to have fishing sims. We're going to talk about why. So were you able to find any? I wasn't able to really I didn't do a ton of research, but I wasn't really able to find history around fishing in video games. Were you able to uncover anything or dig anything up about like what maybe the first fishing games or fishing sims or fishing mini games were in video games? Or do you have any idea where it might have come from?
I don't know where it started. I mean, there's fishing games that date all the way back to like the NES era, and there's like Link's Awakening, for example, on Game Boy has a fishing mini game. Other various JRPGs, Breath of Fire, Suikoden, like those all had like fishing mini games in them. Oddly enough, Final Fantasy didn't. I don't know about Dragon Quest because I haven't played them. Yeah, and then more modern renditions of games like Red Dead Redemption. Of course, every Zelda, Animal Crossing, like there's Final Fantasy 15, there's fishing everywhere. But I don't know where it really started. I liked the article you had linked to me from tvtropes.org, which makes sense. Because video games, at least the way we see them today, because in 1983, we had the crash of the video game industry, and that was kind of brought on through Atari, allowing any mom and pop person from their garage to publish games and then flood the market with so many video games with no quality control, and no one really knew what was valuable and what wasn't. And so and that's like a super high level, ridiculously summed up, very quick story of why the video game crash happened. And then Nintendo picked up from the ashes and came out with the Nintendo and actually marketed it more as a toy with a robot and a mat and a gun and all these other things, these peripherals. And since then, modern video games have kind of taken that, like the idea that games came from Japan, like Japanese games are where they are. And so the idea of what we see, it has greatly changed since the early 2000s when Microsoft hit and Western RPGs took off and such. But in that meantime, from like the late 80s and through the 90s, Japan was the king of video games. And also, consequently, in Japan, one of its leading food industries is fishing. And what this TV Tropes article says here is that the culture there is where squid and octopus are seen as delicious daily treats on a level with the McDonald's. So fishing is ingrained into the culture. Everyone does it over there.
Yep.
Where like in America, or at least, I don't know how Europe is or Scandinavian countries, because I know like they're super big fishers too. But in America, it's like very much seen as a hobby. We have supermarkets that are flooded with fish. We don't need to do it. We're, of course,
right, and it's also associated with a type of like stereotype, right? Like it's associated with country. You would expect that like country folk would go fishing and people who wear camo, stuff like that. Whereas in like Japan, it's a little bit more ubiquitous. Like people go fishing, like they have little fishing spots set up in cities and stuff like that. Where you can
it's
just
weird
go.
Because like there's also like the elite fishers in America, so it's like the super rich have like this whole fishing culture, and then it's like the country kind of low class people, the working class folks have like the culture around fishing, but the middle class doesn't really seem to engage in it.
Some people do. Like, I mean, it's seen as like I do think it's seen as like sort of a suburban white middle-aged man. You know what I mean? Like no matter any part of the country would have the guy who, you know, it's I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you think of like dads who fish. Again, we are totally just riffing off of stereotypes. We are not by any means trying to like be prescriptive as to what people who are fishing, like absolutely it's an incredibly, what we're trying to highlight is like many other parts of the world have better attitudes towards fishing than Americans do. But even in America, like obviously there are I know tons of guys who are all kinds, like guys and women who are all kinds of personalities and all kinds of different, you know, socioeconomic classes, and many of them are into fishing and just because it's great. And I mean the appeal of fishing is pretty obvious. It's a chance to get out, a chance to get away, do something peaceful and calm. And I imagine that other than the getting out and getting away, you can still create that escapism in a video game. And then also that idea of like, it's not a frantic button mashing, you know, combo. You're not clicking and micromanaging units or, you know, trying to pull off crazy combos or headshots or anything like that. It's just, it's fishing. It's peaceful. It's calm. There's an element of waiting and patience to it. And so I imagine that's much of the appeal there.
Going all the way back to my tie back to Japanese video games, because it's so ingrained into the culture. If a video game you're playing has enough side quests and mini games, then you're likely to find a fishing mini game somewhere in there.
Yep.
Because if video games are coming from Japan fishes all the time in their culture. It's just going to be in there because that's their art, that's their stories, that's who they are. It's gonna be there.
I can't verify the authenticity of this claim here because I don't necessarily trust this website. Yep. But there's a website called virtualpet.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, not just the TV Tropes one, but the virtual pet. Okay. I was looking up, doing a little bit of research while you were talking, and I found this site, but it's actually a very, very detailed list of the history of fishing games. So, but it might have just been done by an enthusiast online. So again, I can't validate the authenticity here. However, Radio Shack, they're claiming that Radio Shack may have launched the category with a 1977 game, Gone Fishing, which was written in TRS-DOS Basic by William Ingle for the TRS-80 model. And then they also are saying Fishing Derby was released by Activision for the Atari 2600 in 1980. So between those two, one of them may be considered again, depending on what you think of the DOS version of the game. But so those are potentially two very, very early examples of what may have been the origins of fishing sims. So cool. All right. Any other thoughts there with history and the kind of culture surrounding the origins of fishing video games?
The more I think about it, fishing really is like ubiquitous in American culture too. Because now I'm like running through my head of every example that just counters everything I said earlier. I was like, wait, yeah, you're right. There's fishing happening at every single socioeconomical class I'm interacting with. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's really strange. Like, how is it when I read a paragraph about Japanese fishing and glean a feel of it like being a more pervasive thing in Japan than America, but yet have the evidence right here in America? It's like, maybe it's not that much more over there.
Well, I don't know. I think you're honest. There are different. There's definitely different attitudes towards fishing in the West that are different in Japan. I think it's just because, again, as an island nation, Japan is like fishing and just being out on the sea is so much more rooted in their history and culture, whereas a big landlocked, or a big partially landlocked country like the United States, where some states are landlocked, some aren't, some are coastal. You're just going to have a much wider variety of exposure to fishing, I would imagine, in America and Europe as well. So who knows? But I do agree with you. I think there are some different attitudes towards it, but it's still very prevalent in both countries, which is why it's very prevalent in video games. So what are some examples of fishing mini games in video games that we're talking about? Specifically trying to highlight the contrast of like, why is fishing in this game? So one of the ones that comes to mind, or the two that comes to mind, there was one that inspired it primarily, and I fired up Final Fantasy 15 in an attempt to try to get into that game. I failed. I decided so aggressively to put that game down after playing it for like 5 hours that I said, I'm going to buy an entirely different game this month that I wasn't anticipating buying just because I don't want to feel like I should play Final Fantasy 15, which is good. It was a good attitude for me to be able to recognize I didn't want to see that game through to the end. However, one of the things that just turned me off so much was that like part of the game and part of the platinum trophy specifically is you have to max out each. There's 4 characters in your parties. They each have specialized skills, and you have to max those out. And those skills they're not things that you would expect. Like one's the sword wielder, so you have to max out swords. No, like it's like things like walking, cooking, picture taking, and then of course the primary characters is fishing. And so there's this entire fishing mini game that was core to the game's experience. And I was like, this is Final Fantasy. Like when I think Final Fantasy, I think of like cool Japanese characters with awesome hair teaming up to fight, gods and monsters and blah, 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 blah in like cool cyberpunk sci-fi / fantasy worlds. Like that's what I think of when I think of Final Fantasy. I don't think fishing mini games. Why is there fishing mini game in Final Fantasy 15? There's that, and then the other example I was also thinking of immediately is Nier Automata. There's another Square Enix game, actually. It seems to be harping on Square Enix pretty hard today, but Nier Automata had a fishing mini game in it where you basically made your robot fish for you. And if it wasn't for the trophy shop, I would have been really annoyed that I had to do fishing, because like I can't say for sure that you have to do fishing to get the platinum trophy, but I'm pretty sure you have to do fishing to get some of the materials you need to max out the weapons, which there is a trophy for maxing out the weapons. So thank God for the trophy shop. I got to skip the fishing entirely, but I'm like, why is there fishing in this game? This is some mind-bending, crazy sci-fi story about, androids and robots at a war with aliens and humans that may or may not be extinct, that may or may not live on the moon. why am I fishing? What am I doing here? Do you have any other examples?
My first kind of foray into a fishing minigame that I thought was shoved in, didn't make any sense, is Link's Awakening. You have to use fishing to collect an empty bottle, to get some of the hidden... There are these seashells hidden around that you need to use to upgrade your sword, and you have to fish for that. And I was like, why is this here? I don't want to do this, but it wasn't as egregious. It was just kind of an extra thing that you only needed to worry about if you wanted to get the extra bottles and extra sword upgrades. Then there's Ocarina of Time, which requires you to fish to progress in the story. And I got stuck getting or do you? Is it for the big Goron sword? Is that what you need the fish scale for? You have to get the upgraded scale?
I know there's one for...
There's two fish scales to go underwater.
Yeah,
you have to be able to dive in order to progress the story.
You need the silver scale for the big Goron sword, and you need the golden scale for a heart container or heart piece, I think. So I don't think you need the golden scale for... Yeah, you just need the silver ones for the big Goron sword. So yeah, but I feel like you had to also fish for something else too before you got the silver scale. No, maybe not. Maybe you don't need it for... I always did it because I always wanted the big Goron sword. So I feel like it's part of the core experience, but it might have been entirely optional in regards to...
It may have been now.
Yeah, who knows?
But anyway, it was in the way. I was like, I don't want to do it. I hate it, but I did it. And it can... Like, the list continues. There's so many games that I've played that is these annoying fishing mini games.
Dark Cloud had 15.
Dark Cloud had it. Like I said, Dragon Ball. Kakarot is the most recent game I had that had a shoehorned fishing mini game. Lure the fish, hit the button at the right time. And of course, Animal Crossing. But Animal Crossing actually ropes it into the core experience because there's a museum and you want to collect all the fish to kind of fill the museum. And there's different fish that show up each month. And so like that's a little less egregious to me because one of the things that you do every day, it's like you want to catch bugs and catch fish and then go diving for shells and sea creatures and like those are the things that the game is made of. Those are the core game experience things that you do to play the game, and part of decorating your house and decorating your island and getting to know your island mates and your villagers and such. Like fishing is fine there. It doesn't feel like it's like shoehorned in, but I hate it when you're playing something and you have to fish. Like I did not fish in World of Warcraft. I absolutely despised it. I refused to do it.
And like fishing was one of those so like World of Warcraft had different types of there was like the primary professions where you could only have two of them. You had to pick, you could only be a miner and jewel crafter, or a miner and blacksmith, or a blacksmith and enchanter, whatever. Like you had to pick between two. And usually you picked one that was like a gathering profession and one that was a crafting profession. And then there were the secondary professions where they were first aid, cooking, and fishing. And you could get all three of them and level them up. And I never did that. All of them were tedious and stupid. Like the first aid one, you had to collect cloth from, people and make bandages out of them. Cooking, you had to get various stuff and make recipes and all that stuff. And then, fishing. And but like every MMO ever has fishing. Like I can't think of an MMO, like a proper MMO, like Guild Wars I think has it. Final Fantasy 14, did they have it? I'm not sure if they do or not, but they probably have it.
Yeah, and I didn't do it.
Every freaking MMO that I'm aware of has a fishing minigame in it, and it's just like... I guess those aren't as bad because they are trying to give you the experience of being an adventurer out in the wild, and fishing would probably be a part of that, but still, it's just like... And the interesting thing about fishing minigames is like very few of them are required, even for platinums. Like even for a lot of these games I'm looking at, I'm like, oh yeah, trophies, like even some of them don't even have requirements for that, but like, I don't know. Yeah, depending on the game, I would have various levels of feeling like I had to do them. For Final Fantasy 15, I definitely felt like I had to do it, which is part of what inspired this episode.
Yep, and another game that's egregious like that, where you feel like you have to do it, but it's tedious and annoying, is Pokemon.
Yes,
you have to fish in every area over and over and over again to collect them all. And I would remember looking at the player's guide and be like, oh, there's a small chance I can catch this shark thing here, so I guess I'm gonna stand on the beach and fish for 3 hours waiting for this thing to spawn, and then when I do, I accidentally kill it and then I'm stuck fishing again. It's so annoying.
Yep. Fun. Cool. So do you think that, kind of like a side question to that, is for some of these games that we're talking about, are there any that you feel like fishing fits in the overall game design, like the fishing system is like, oh, this makes sense for this game? Or do you think that, so like the Pokemon, since we just talked about it, it is a good example because like there are so many Pokemon that are just fish. Like that's their entire look is their fish. So it kind of makes sense to fish for them. But there are others. Yeah, there are other games that I don't like. I feel like it's directly in contrast with the design of the game. Like the game's meant to be this, like Nier Automata again, it's meant to be this very mind-bending sci-fi thriller, with lots of Japanese anime action battles and stuff like that. And like then you have this fishing in areas of the game that like the water, you can only fish in water, right? That makes sense. But like there's like an ocean in the game, but other than that, like all the water you can encounter are like creeks, like ankle high water. It's like it doesn't even make sense for the fishing to happen. So like what games are where the fishing comes in direct contrast with what the rest of the game's about? Like that's the things what I'm trying to aim this question at.
Yeah, I think Final Fantasy 15, going back to that painful experience, there's really no reason these guys that are traveling across the land to go to a wedding need to fish.
Yeah, they explain it as like it's Noctis's favorite hobby. It's the primary character's favorite hobby. It's his thing, and he likes fishing. So it's like, okay, well, it could have been anything. He could have like basket weaving, and that would have been more interesting minigame than fishing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I remember one of the rare games for N64, either like Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, or Donkey Kong 64, had some ridiculously unnecessarily complicated fishing minigame. And I say unnecessarily complicated in like the way the mechanics feel. Maybe it didn't age well. Maybe at the time it was fine, but now it's like going back, I don't remember what it was. Yeah. When action adventure games just throw fishing in, it does feel like
kills
it's tacked on.
Yeah, kills the pace.
And it does kill the pace. And it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And I am struggling to find more concrete examples because they're also painful.
Yeah, I don't mind them so much when they are entirely optional. Like when they are definitely like a thing where it's like, at best you get maybe a buff, a bonus, or you can make certain food dishes that you couldn't make otherwise. But as long as it doesn't bar you from like progressing, like towards a trophy or something like that, then it's fine. But then whatever, it's for the fishing enthusiasts. But yeah, otherwise, like if you make it in any way, shape, or form encouraged, if you try to encourage and push your fishing minigame on me, like please don't waste the development hours.
Yep.
But well, let's talk then about like how are they designed? Like what are the mechanics that we're talking about? Like how do these games try to simulate fishing?
The basic gist of it is just like throw something in the water and wait.
Yep.
And then the fish bites and you reel it in.
Right. And so the reeling in is, there's all these different ways. The reeling in is where they can get, quote, creative because there's all these different ways of doing that. In World of Warcraft, it was like you waited for the thing to bounce, then you clicked it. It was that simple. In Final Fantasy 15, they had this complicated system where you had different lures had different advantages. And then you also had like attack strength of your fishing rod, and your your line had durability, so you had to make sure you used you bought or crafted or whatever the best lines and equip them to your. It was so complicated, and then there was then you had to do this whole thing where you move the thing to the side, and then while you're reeling in, but you didn't want to reel in too fast because that might break your line. It's just so many complicated little aspects to try to simulate something that doesn't need to be broken down that much.
Yeah, that's I started with the simplest example because every aspect of fishing can be an entire system in and of itself. So the rod is kind of like your sword, your equipment, like your armor, right? So many different rods have different rates of which, or you can even block out specific fish can only be caught with specific rods.
Yep.
And then you have a reel.
Or lures. You need certain lures. Yep.
Yeah, and certain lures are more rare, or more expensive. So you have to go through this entire dungeon to get a lure that you would then use to fish that you could potentially lose, and then you have to go back to the dungeon and grind it back out again. So there's all these other things kind of centered around fishing that can happen in video games that all just make it so painful. And then the reeling in minigame, you can do countless things with it, just a timed button press, like Animal Crossing, like you were saying, this whole tension drawing and using a joystick and all the way down to motion controls on the Wii where you had the nunchuck and you had to reel it in.
Yes. Was that Skyward Sword had that, right? You had to do that in Skyward Sword.
Or Twilight Princess, one of the two.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I think maybe both. Good Lord. Yeah. Because I remember doing that and I had Twilight Princess on the GameCube, so it certainly had to have been in Skyward Sword because I know I did that at some point. I will say there is one way video game mechanic system that handled fishing a way that I like, and it is Breath of the Wild's answer to fishing in that game was beautiful because it was so elegant. Because yes, there was fishing in the game. Yes, you could collect fish, and fish were needed for certain recipes, and fish, like, it was helpful to collect fish in certain circumstances. But thank God they did not include any stinking fishing poles, any stinking fishing mechanics, anything. You caught fish the way you did everything else in that game, which is you either shot them with your bow or you blasted them with bombs. And I loved it. You could throw a bomb in the lake and then blow it, detonate it, and all these fish would float to the top. It was so
Couldn't you
great.
also take Metal Gear, not the game, Metal Gear, metal equipment like swords and shields, and when there's a storm around, you're about to get electrocuted, throw it into the water, and then lightning would hit the lake, and then all the fish would rise to the surface?
Yes. So Nintendo just answered that, like, idea of, like, well, I mean, Breath of the Wild is very much a game that is a physics simulator in regards to, like, oh, well, if this works on this, would it work on this too? And in most cases, Nintendo has accounted for those possibilities, including, yes, if you threw a magical bomb into a lake and detonated it, those fish would absolutely rise to the top. Same thing with the lightning. Yes, if you got attracted lightning to strike a pond, it would zap all the fish in the area. And it was great. I just love that. So I love that, yes, the game included fishing, but like everything else in the game, they allowed you to utilize creative solutions to the problem, quote unquote, of fishing. And it was great. It was fantastic. And it may have been the only game that I ever spent willing amount of time fishing in because I could have
because you were doing it in a fun, like, creative way.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
So in general, though, back to the idea of, like, the fishing rod and all that stuff, do you find these fishing mini games true to the reality of fishing, to your understanding of fishing? Obviously, I don't know if you've ever been fishing, but do you think that they're, like, do they work as fishing simulators in and of themselves? Are they overcomplicated, undercomplicated, or do you think it's a waste of time for them to spend so much effort on lures or rods or whatever? Yeah, what are your thoughts on the kind of verisimilitude of fishing mini games? There's your big word. There's your SAT word for the day.
Yeah, the spectrum is crazy. So of course you can have really easy Animal Crossing style where you just have a rod and that's it, and then you cast your line, the little splash happens, you press the button, you got the fish, and it doesn't matter other than what time of day or what time of year. And it's the only variable, and that to me is perfect. But it's also kind of true to fishing, just really, really elementary.
Right.
And that is the time of day and the time of year, different types of fish. And then there's the river versus ocean. So you have freshwater, saltwater fish. And, like, that's kind of cool. I think that's well done, and it's not annoying or obtrusive. And then the fishing simulator side of things, they do it right. And, like, looking at the competition of fishing, or like the actual hobby of fishing, and try to
all that research and all that.
Yep. And like do all the physics and all of the super detailed, like, flight simulator level fishing simulators. If you're into that, that's your game. Like, go do that, because it's just like being on a lake or going to the river or going to the ocean and have that experience and have that fun. Where the problem is when they shoehorn it into a game and you don't want to do it, but you have to, and you don't feel like it adds to the game experience at all. So the reality of fishing is that it's a relaxing activity. It's something you do. It's passive. You throw a line out. If you've ever gone fishing, you can either be on a boat and be doing the trot lines, and you mount all your fishing lines, and you travel along a path that you think fish are at, and you have different lures of different weights, and they're all on different, like, things. All of the work is up front. You set it all up. You know in advance what to do, and then you kind of sit back and wait. And then when the line gets pulled, you jump up and you grab your rod and you start reeling it in. And then the action happens. It's very cool. And that kind of experience, do video games capture that? I don't know. Because for me, fishing is about the hanging out with people and, like, doing the thing. Fishing is kind of the background activity. It's something you can do that's fun, and you can get some delicious food out of it. Whereas in a video game, you can't really stimulate that aspect of it, because most of the time fishing isn't communal at all. There's no video game that I can think of where there's, like, a multiplayer fishing component where we're going to go hang out together, because there's so much more fun things to do in video games than sit around waiting for a fish line to grab.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to do any of that, like Sea of Thieves, for example, I think comes to mind. You can fish in that, and you could have your party all go fishing, I guess. But why? When you could be on your ship, like, sailing the seas and finding a sunken ship and doing more fun, attacking skeletons, and, like, that stuff's way more fun than sitting around. But in real life, you can sit around over some fishing lines and have a good time. So in that regard, the fishing is not true to the reality of what fishing is at all. But the fact that it is a relaxing activity that can be done in video games where you could disconnect from your busy hustle bustle. You might not want to play a shooter game or an action game or an RPG. You don't want to get lost in systems. You just want to fish, and like Stardew Valley could be your deal. Like you can, relaxingly just fish as you want, or like maybe the fishing mechanics in MMOs is something you can just do between raids, and you want to pass some time and feel like you're making some progress in some things. And so in that regard, fishing can kind of capture the reality of real life fishing.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'm torn on this answer, and that's partially because of my own biases. You know what I mean? Like, I don't find it true to reality. Doesn't necessarily have to be true to reality, though, if it captures the same feeling, kind of like what you're talking about there. It's just like, doesn't really need to be exact or specific. For the people who want to like min-max it, but don't have the means by which to necessarily, go fishing, then like there's fishing simulators out there. For people who are like, oh, I like how, I can see how I can see even how the one I've been ragging on, Final Fantasy 15, I can see how like the Noctis fishing minigame could be fun for people who are like, oh, I like how they've broken down the fishing to like RPG stats where, you get better rods, increase your quote attack power, getting better reels. So I could see how that would be fun alongside that experience of like, oh, I got this cool reel out of a dungeon, I guess, or I don't know where they dropped from or whatever, but like, or I found this at this shop or whatever in this store. Like that's kind of cool to be able to kind of min-max that. Maybe they wouldn't necessarily have, maybe someone like that maybe not have the appeal of going fishing in the real world or the means to, but maybe still likes that tinkering aspect of it in video games. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just don't have a lot of experience with fishing to be able to answer the question fully. So
yeah, I mean, you kind of highlighted with Final Fantasy 15. If somebody's like, I don't really feel like getting into a game, I don't have a lot of time to play, but I want to listen to this podcast and kind of just check out and play something, I can at least do this mini game to fish in the game to get some in-game bonuses elsewhere for like tonight. Like today, I'm just going to fish with Noctis and I'm going to put on this podcast, relax, kind of check out, but yet still make progress in the overall game. Because you're getting gear
sure.
And
like I think of like
materials.
I think of like World of Warcraft. They're like, so if you're a mount hunter or something, and there are mounts associated with fishing, it's like, okay, well, I'll level up my fishing. I'll turn a show on. I'll primarily watch the show and just do this kind of passive activity that doesn't require a lot.
Which mimics fishing in real life,
right? Exactly.
Fishing is the passive thing,
right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So I guess I answered that question. So my last question that we'll spend a few minutes breaking down here is. Why do you think that there are so many games that include fishing mini games that are shoehorned in? Why do you think this practice is so prevalent? Because there's nothing. I mean, biking is a super popular hobby across the world, and you don't see biking mini games in every video game. I could probably count on like two hands the amount of like biking that there is in video games that I've ever experienced. You know what I mean? But like, what is it about fishing? What do you think it is about fishing that has found its way to worm its way into just like hundreds and hundreds of video games?
We've kind of danced around it already in our discussion tonight. We talked about how the simple act of you have a rod, you cast a line into a water, and you collect something. Those are the basic fundamentals of fishing, and you can turn every one of those aspects of fishing into its own system or minigame in and of itself, but you're getting something. You're spending time collecting something. You actually get the fish, or you get the material, or you find the buried treasure from your rod. And then the rod is gear, and the line, and the mechanics of how to reel it in. Like all that stuff just lends itself naturally to being represented in video games as a mini game.
Yeah, I imagine it's very easy to design for, ultimately. You know what I mean? Like fairly easy to design for, to actually program that in without much effort. That pads the game length and makes it feel like, oh, there's so much cool, fun stuff to do. You can go fishing. Probably is actually a very kind of low barrier of actual design that goes into it compared to the rest of the game. I also think that I mean, this is pure speculation, but I do wonder just maybe how prevalent fishing is as a hobby amongst game developers. Like, I imagine being stuck inside, programming all day, very, very high stress, very, very, potentially crunch and stuff like that. Like, I imagine a lot of these guys just want to like, okay, I'm going to, this weekend when I have 2 days off, I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to get out in nature. I'm going to do something that doesn't require me to really use my brain and just, catch some fish and drink some beer or whatever. Like, I imagine that's probably very attractive to game developers, game designers. And so I imagine it's quite common of a practice, and especially if that's part of the culture of the of the game development studio or whatever, like, oh yeah, we all go fishing. Like we all go fishing when we have, once we'll celebrate and go fishing when the game's done. So pure speculation. I don't know any examples. So if there's anyone in the industry who could maybe shine some light on that, but just with how prevalent it is and how like lovingly it's included in some of these games, because sometimes it doesn't feel shoehorned in at all. Sometimes it feels almost over designed. Like, man, you guys really put some thought into this.
Yeah.
And, include it into this mini game. Sometimes it feels like that's the case. Is like these guys must love fishing. So that's one of my thoughts as well.
Yeah, it goes back. We talked about it early at the beginning of the episode how prevalent fishing is in Japanese culture, and that's kind of video games came out of Japan, and it was so in Japanese culture they're in touch with nature in some ways, and different spiritual connections to nature that is different from kind of I'm painting broad strokes. I'm sorry, but in like mainstream American Christianity stuff, like there is kind of a connection and a respect for the environment, but there's no like deep spiritual connection to the earth like in Eastern religions have. And so that there's kind of that spiritual aspect of fishing as well, where there's care and respect to fish and being on the water and being one with earth. And like in some regards our kind of capitalist North American Western society either doesn't focus on that, or it kind of shuns that and says that our connection is with our creator, or like the broader sense, and not really the earth. It kind of diminishes creation sometimes. And that goes into like, I could spin off into a million conversations about the environment, global warming, and how people respect or not the earth or what they care about it. But whenever I experience Japanese culture in a way, catering it like in a way that a white male Western straight man can experience Japanese culture, like I watch anime, I play video games. I don't go to Japan. I'm dying to. I'm in love and captivated by Japanese culture. I do just get this feel that there's this spiritualization to their connection to the earth, and I think fishing is related to that in a stronger way than it is here in America, where it's more of a hobby. You do it for money, do it for competition. It's still a thing people do for fun. Or in the East, it's more life than it is fun. And like you were saying, you're on an island country, your family depends on it. Maybe you do sell fish at the market, and your livelihood depends on it. But it's not it doesn't feel like as, I don't know. I'm probably misspeaking 1,000 things, and like my intention is never to offend anyone, and I completely speak from what I know of as ignorance when it comes to these things, because like I said, I'm an American white male, so I don't know. But I think that's why we do see a lot of Japanese video games, especially RPGs, have these fishing systems, and like you said, some actually are crafted with love and care, unnecessarily so. You're like, wow, this is a surprisingly deep fishing system in this RPG that's about political strife and swords and stuff. So that's my reason, maybe kind of exploring externally processing why there's so much fishing in video games.
Cool. All right. Well, we want to hear your thoughts, listeners and pod smashers. We want to know what your thoughts on fishing video games are. Fishing in video games, mini games, systems, whatever. So feel free to share your thoughts. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you think that they are just the most relaxing, enjoyable parts of video games? Do you have any video games where you enjoyed the fishing more than the rest of the video game? Or do you, like Termite and Penguin, generally try to avoid them if you can, and dislike them when you feel like you have to do them? So we want to hear those thoughts and more, and Termite will share with you all the places that you can share your feedback with us.
The quick rundown is just go to 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with links to everywhere we are, our podcast platforms and our social media outlets, and then twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. Make sure you go there and subscribe so you're made aware of when we stream, both Monday and Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. And look for our Discord server and jump in and hang out with us.
All right, sweet. Well, next week we'll have another episode for you, and we'll see you then.
See you next week.